Picture a typical Gen X misunderstanding scene. You tell a Gen Xer something big, a layoff, a breakup, a health scare, and they respond with a half smile and a joke so dry it feels like sand. If you're younger, it can land as cold. If you're older, it can land as rude. And if you're Gen X, it's often meant as a kind of care. I'm here. I'm steady. I'm not going to make you manage my emotions too. That mismatch is the heart of why people say they don't understand Gen X. You're not failing a trivia test about 80s movies. You're running into a different emotional dialect, shaped by the social weather they grew up in and reinforced by what the world rewarded in them. Before we psychoanalyze a whole generation, one important caveat. Generational talk is messy science. People love clean stories. Gen X is cynical. Gen Z is anxious. But behavior is always a blend of age, where you are in life, period, what's happening in society right now, and cohort, what was happening when you were forming your worldview. Those factors get tangled, which is why researchers treat generation traits carefully. Still, cohorts do share some formative context. Pew, for example, commonly defines Gen X as people born from 1965 through 1980. That puts Gen X childhood and adolescence roughly in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s, an era with a specific mix: rising dual-income households, higher divorce rates than earlier decades, and a cultural push toward self-management. One symbol of this is the latchkey kid. The term became common in the 70s and 80s for children who regularly came home to an empty house and let themselves in. It's not that every Gen Xer was literally alone after school, but the logic of that period was loud. Be capable. Don't be a burden. Figure it out. Don't panic. If you had emotions, you were expected to handle them privately or turn them into something socially acceptable: competence, humor, sarcasm, or quiet endurance. That's one major reason Gen X can read as detached to younger generations. In a lot of younger cultural spaces today, emotional transparency is a form of respect. You show you care by naming your feelings, validating, processing out loud. For many Gen Xers, doing that in public can feel like putting work on other people. It can feel like indulgence, not intimacy. So when a Gen Xer goes straight to solutions, okay, here's what we do. It isn't necessarily lack of empathy. It's a different model of empathy. Reduce chaos, restore control, move forward. It's practical compassion. There's another layer that makes Gen X hard to place. They're a bridge generation. They remember analog childhoods and digital adulthoods. They learned social life without constant documentation, then adapted to a world where everyone has a searchable archive. If you're Gen Z, their privacy can look secretive. If you're a boomer, their skepticism can look disloyal. But a lot of it is just an adaptation to having lived on both sides of a cultural shift. Trust the system enough to function, distrust it enough to survive disappointment. This is where the why they care anyway part becomes interesting. Gen X has a reputation for not caring. The shrug generation, the whatever vibe, the irony. But irony often isn't apathy. It's armor. Was limited, or where showing distress was limited, or where showing distress didn't reliably produce support, you learn to regulate yourself fast. You learn to keep your needs small. Over time, that creates a particular interpersonal style. I'll handle mine, you handle yours, and we'll meet in the middle with a joke. Then, the world changes. Younger people start naming trauma more openly, talking about therapy, boundaries, nervous system regulation, and Gen X gets described as emotionally unavailable. That can sting, even if they roll their eyes. Because many Gen Xers did care. They just showed it by being dependable, by staying functional, by not collapsing when things got hard. And here's the twist. Being dependable is often invisible. If you're the person who doesn't melt down, people forget you might be carrying anything at all. In midlife, that invisibility can intensify. A lot of Gen Xers are in a classic squeeze, supporting kids and aging parents, trying to keep work stable, and realizing retirement is no longer a guaranteed script. Recent reporting has even described Gen X as moving into sandwich generation pressures and feeling unprepared for retirement, which adds another layer of I have to be the adult in the room. When life demands that much steadiness, you don't always want to be told your steadiness is actually emotional repression. So why do they care if you don't understand them? Because misunderstanding isn't neutral. It changes how people treat you. If people read your humor as cruelty, they keep you at arm's length. If they read your directness as aggression, they stop coming to you. If they read your privacy as suspicious, they don't offer trust. Over time, you can become socially miscast, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the surrounding culture changed its definitions of warmth, respect, and authenticity. Also, Gen X has a particular sensitivity to being overlooked. They sit between two huge cultural spotlights: boomers as the dominant adult generation for decades, and millennials/Gen Z as the dominant future conversation. Gen X often becomes the punchline or the footnote. Caring can show up as irritation, not because they need applause, but because nobody likes feeling erased. If you want a practical way to understand Gen X, think of them as people socialized to believe your feelings are real, but the world won't reorganize around them. That belief can create resilience. It can also create distance, and both can be true at once. It's also worth saying, not every Gen Xer fits the stereotype. Cohorts are not personality types. Within Gen X, you'll find deeply expressive people, highly communal people, very spiritual people, very gentle people, just like any group. The more accurate claim is, a common set of conditions made certain coping styles more common and more rewarded. That's a subtler, less memeable truth, but it's closer to reality. So what do you do with this as a viewer? If you're younger and you want connection with Gen X, try translating warmth into their dialect. Don't just ask, how do you feel? Try, what's the hardest part right now? Or, do you want solutions, distraction, or just someone here? You're offering care without demanding a performance of vulnerability. If you're Gen X and you feel misread, consider that your style may have been adaptive in one era and confusing in another. That doesn't mean you have to change your personality. It might mean occasionally adding a subtitle to your coping. I'm joking because I care. Or, I'm quiet because I'm thinking, not because I don't care. Small clarifications can prevent big misunderstandings. And if you're anyone watching this and thinking, so who's right? The calmer answer is, neither. These are different survival grammars. Gen X doesn't need to become emotionally performative to be caring. Younger generations don't need to become stoic to be resilient. The real skill is mutual translation. Noticing that what looks like coldness might be steadiness, and what looks like oversharing might be a bid for safety. That's the reason they care anyway. Not because they need everyone to get them as a brand, but because being seen accurately is a human need, even for the generation that pretends it isn't.